into this. Let's get into this. So
Sure.
you just got your book done.
Yes.
And when did you get that done?
I finished it in about May and got it first, got it out into Amazon and within circulation beginning of June.
Okay. And the title again, Robbie?
Camp X Underground New Beginnings.
Okay, so if anybody doesn't know Robbie Cressman, he's got a lot of information on Camp X, which a lot of people don't know about. I didn't know about, and thankfully that I met Robbie. He came down to do some classes with some defense. Now I like to you to tell us how you say it because the self defense is kind of a little
Mhm.
off. So if you can explain a little bit of that, and that's how we met, and then we'll go into your book.
Yeah, sure. Sure. In short, I've had the blessing of having a 20-year career as a very specialized instructor, teaching a combination of defensive or protection skills to aggressive force and survival type skills within the Allied Special Operations community or Special Forces community, the combination of Tier 1 Special Forces, government agencies, and almost every brand of policing special operations you can think of, from Air Marshal, Secret Service, domestic covert programs, hostage rescue, SWAT. I mean, all those types of programs. And so essentially, I developed some specialized methods that were focused on being able to take folks and train them in an extremely short period of time. And essentially, Greg, as you know, and as we've got to know each other, COVID changed everything for me. I mean, it shut my work down. I was in Colombia for January of 2020, and then I was in England with the SAS for February of 2020. The COVID hammer fell in the West, especially in North America, and I didn't work for a year and a half or almost 2 years till I was ended up being in the Ukraine. At that point in time. So for me, there was a new mission. One being that I had to step out. I could no longer be in agreement with a lot of different government organizations. Just knowing the things we know, and I'm like, I've got to put a foot down. I disagree with the tyranny. I disagree with the things that are going on, and so that opened a door with me to start to get the vision of some of the things that we've been chatting about to challenge men to be men. I mean, stand up and be protectors, and to bring good, absolutely functional, real protection skills to average folks so that they can protect their families, their spouses, and stand up and be the men behind, like you said, behind the women when needed, and so forth. So, and the history has always been a big thing for me, and it's been a real heartbeat with me through 20 years working with professional agencies. So yeah, it's the changes in COVID. You always find, as Michael Jordan once said in the middle of a lot of interviews with him over the death of his father, you got to look for the positive. And so for me, it's like, okay, what's the mission now then? I'm
Right.
still involved with special forces and some groups today, and traveling. I'm off to South Africa shortly, and very shortly and such. But the reality is, okay, what's the mission now? And where do we go? And part of that mission is absolutely to challenge Canadians in a time where I find that so many Canadians are confused. A lot of them are in remorse over what they feel is the loss of the country that they knew. Where's the Canada I grew up with? Where's the common sense? Where are the patriots? And part of it for me is to have Canadians be aware of the insanely amazing history that we have. Our grandparents were absolutely phenomenal at what they did. So if there's anybody, Greg, that can survive the hour that we're in, it's Canadians. It's in our DNA. And my challenge is, Canadians, understand your past. Be proud, promote it, understand it, and you know what? Use it as fuel to stand up and to move forward to positively impact future generations.
You know what? That's perfectly said. And I keep telling people, learn from your past to build your present so you'll have a strong future. And wow, what a past that you uncovered and you taught me. And holy moly, guys. I mean, this is going to be a packed bunch of little segments that we're going to have here. But honestly, thank you, COVID, for happening. I
In a
wouldn't have
way.
met Robbie. I would have
Yeah.
met some great people. You know what? Once you know, you can't unknow. And what COVID taught us is truth. Sometimes truth hurts, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
you know what? We lost friends, we lost family. Some of them are coming back now. Some have remorse. And they look at us going, "Oh my gosh, you were right." Sometimes they don't want to say it because they just feel crappy. But again, getting back to, it doesn't have to be negative. I don't want people to say sorry. I don't want to be right. I want to be true, and I want people to stand up for themselves. Right. So stand on your own 2 feet. So segmenting forward to the next segment here, what we're going to talk about is really, I want to get into Camp X. So if you can tell us kind of the starting of Camp X and where it is, because people, this is pretty cool. So Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to try to make this as short and precise as possible. Essentially, it was the direness of the summer of 1940, the Battle of Britain, and was really the initial seed for the necessity of Camp X. Well, first of all, what was Camp X? Camp X was the most highly classified training facility for spies, secret agents, and saboteurs in the world in the early 1940s and World War II, and it existed in Oshawa, Ontario. And what is incredibly impactful in the bigger picture of Camp X, is so we understand what we're talking about here, is that Camp X, little old Camp X in Oshawa, Ontario, is absolutely the fundamental birthplace of the entire James Bond legacy. That's fact, not fiction. It's not debated. And also the absolute beginning of the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, and our Western intelligence perspective. But Greg, let me stop right there to understand that I don't celebrate what a lot of our intelligence agencies have become. What I do celebrate are the patriots that founded and started those organizations in World War II. And let me tell you, they were nationalists, they were patriots. And if you had accused one of those agents of being a globalist or, a deep state type individual, you would have had a knife to your throat in seconds. Those men and women died for their countries. And so in any case, what precipitated this was the direness of the Battle of Britain, when Britain in the summer of 1940 absolutely thought they were about to be completely overrun. They thought they were about to be completely successfully invaded by the Germans. So Churchill in the underground bunkers essentially had advisors tell him, you need to do a couple of things. Number one of the key objectives, for the sake of time, one of the main objectives, we need to develop resistance fighters, and we need to develop a specialized school outside of European theater where it was safe from immediate invasion. And essentially, Sir William Stevenson called upon a Canadian Sir Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister, called upon a Canadian by the name of Sir William Stevenson, who was the real James Bond, and that's per Ian Fleming, who created the Bond legacy, and essentially hired him as the head, as a Canadian, of all British foreign intelligence. And he created two organizations, or the British Security Coordination in New York, which became his headquarters for British foreign intelligence. And then essentially under the Special Operations Executive built Camp X across the border in Canada. And so this spy school essentially it was a super school. It had 52 courses in total that were offered. It trained they believe about 500 agents. The impact of Camp X alone, they believe, shortened the war by at least a year and a quarter. Just on the efforts of Camp X alone, the Special Operations Executive, probably 2 to 2.5 years. But it was such a super secret spy school that essentially launched a Western modern intelligence capability. And it was Stevenson, the Canadian, the real James Bond, who essentially again became the inspiration for the James Bond character when Ian Fleming trained at Camp X in the summer of 1943. Experienced what was going on there, and Greg got a trip down to the headquarters of Camp X in New York. And guess what? This Brit, who nobody knew at the time. I mean, Ian Fleming was just an agent, a naval intelligence agent with the British government. He was nobody at that time, and beyond that. And he went down to the headquarters, and this is what he found in New York. He found the super secret spy outfit where this little guy who's a consummate spy is walking around. He has these gorgeous women all over the place walking around him, and he's drinking martinis all day long. So does the storyline sound familiar?
It does.
There you go, right? So Camp X, I mean, I could go on for a long time about the accomplishments at Camp X. I mean, everything from Hydra, and just to give you an idea of kind of measuring where things have been in the history in the world. Many of you might have seen the movie The Imitation Game back in 2014, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, and it was about the Enigma, a British coding machine the British machine that broke the German Enigma code. And it was a great big blockbuster, huge movie. And it was important. It was a very important part of what the British did to help win the war. But here's the thing to get that nobody talks about, is that the Enigma operated, first of all, the Canadians created, a system on 8 rotors instead of 4. The Enigma was broken and absolutely taken apart by the Allies. The Canadians developed a system that had over twice the capability and was never broken, and became the foundational platform for modern signals intelligence after the war. And that was developed at Camp X in Canada by Canadian Pat Bailey. Do we talk about that? Now we can have a blockbuster movie on something, and with respect, I mean, that's great work.
Yep.
But what Canadians accomplished here in Hydra alone on the signals intelligence side is so much more monstrous, than what occurred there. So it's, again, 1,000 stories, my friend, of what went on there, the impact of the agents, the incredible stories of how they created a spy school without even the prime minister knowing it existed on Canadian soil, and who played the roles and all of that, and how they secretly in a clandestine capacity brought up. There was murders at the camp. German agents got into the camp. Camp X instructors chased a German agent to a hotel in Oshawa, known as the Genosha Hotel, and Captain William Fairbairn, one of the instructors, killed him in the hotel room. I mean, this is real. This is real high-level movie stuff, and all this stuff happened here in Ontario. Pretty amazing stuff.
It's truly amazing, but we just, for whatever reason, we don't talk about it and we don't learn about it. Now, I don't know if there's a reason for all of that, but
Oh,
this is why we're trying to.
there are absolute reasons.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
when we kind of talk about deep state and all this kind of stuff, I just don't think they want us to have the power, because they know once we have the power, and we saw a little bit of that. Now let's go back a little bit in the lockdowns, that the truckers. Now I
Right.
went to Ottawa with those truckers, and I saw a lot of patriots, and that made me
Yeah, sure.
all warm and fuzzy inside, even though it was 10 below. And that tells me that there are people all across Canada waiting to wake up and know that we are Canadians, the true Canadians, and have,
Yeah.
yes, the DNA behind us to show what we have here in Canada. And again, if you can share a little bit more about some of the things from Camp X that a lot of people still don't know about, and you can still go there, can you not, to see the site? I mean, there's
Well, yeah,
stone and
you can. Yeah, Greg, you can go to the original site. The original site basically is at the bottom of Fixon Road and on the lake there. I mean, it now comes into Philip Murray Drive and such, but if you can find Canlin Ice Sports on the map, what's left of, there's some monuments there, and the original, let's say the fields where the agents trained are there. There's no buildings left, because now, one of the many, many reasons why Camp X, I could give you 15 reasons why Camp X tactically and specifically was located in Oshawa at that location. One of them was during World War II, the Oshawa area was bush, my friend. There was nothing there, right? There's very little there at the time, and there was no 401. The highway 2, the King's Highway was the only thing coming out there. And so the point is that now there's no buildings. Everything was taken down in about 1970, 71. But there is a monument there. There's a great monument and so forth. And you can see where the agents trained at the bluffs, where the bluffs were and so forth. And so you can take a visit. And actually, we run tours. I've had the privilege of working for 20 years with Lynn Philip Hodgson, who's the 47-year expert of the camp. I'm in a bit of a handover process. I'm taking over the legacy for Lynn, as he's older and has health issues and those types of things. And I've been coming up to assist him, and we run tours every summer at the camp. You can come down to the property, and we'll walk you around. There's a lot of industrial parkway now, but we'll show you where the Sinclair farmstead was. We'll show you where these things were. And so there's still some identity there. But with Camp X, the impact to me is what is super incredible, to recognize that the brains are so much like the Avroera program, as we've discussed. The brains behind the Canadian brains and the connectivity and relationship between Canada and the UK, which has been a historical relationship, bred about some of the most phenomenal innovation. All right. Through Camp X and the lines of it. I think, for example, of Casa Loma. Most people don't. They want to talk about a Camp X related fact that most people don't know. Casa Loma, a lot of us, if you've lived around Ontario or visited Toronto, you've gone to see Casa Loma, the big castle. There was the original plan, my friend, in the fall of 1940, summer to fall of 1940, was to extract all British royalty and British leadership and hide them in Canada at Casa Loma, and to hide them there. And at part Station M, which was a very special division of Camp X, was in the basement underground Casa Loma. What did they do there? They made secret gadgets, like the James Bond section does, and the Maxwell Smart section of shoe phone technology. I mean, all that kind of stuff. They would create false and fake documents and create fake uniforms, German uniforms. They did all of that in secrecy under Casa Loma. And there's been even former government people, truly, that had no knowledge of it and said, and accused Lynn Hodgson of creating history. You can't prove that. Station M was not at Castle Loma. Oh, funny, here we go. Here's Eric Kerwayne's manuscript, and he was a second in command of the British Security Coalition in Canada, and he writes about Station M being at Castle Loma and being right there. Another chapter, Greg, that is not talked about, that there's not, it blows me away, and I'm going to start getting super passionate here, but is what is not known is how Canadian Bill Underwood, an instructor at Camp X, trained and developed the most elite assassins during World War II, highest level of training to I think exist at all in the modern era with some of these things. And for Sir William Stevenson, the real James Bond, created assassination teams that were so capable of their tradecraft that they trained them on mobile training locations. They couldn't put them at Camp X even because one location could be compromised. And these guys were designed into special teams of 6 to be dropped into Europe. Okay, and to try to find Hitler and so forth, and to try just to rub him out any way that they could, eliminate that threat. But those teams ended up being dismantled and being bodyguards for Churchill, bodyguards for Roosevelt, and on secret missions. And to give you an idea of how the past intersects with history after that, we probably talked about this, but from your area, one of the most elite members of those assassination teams, which I have woven these assassination teams into Camp X Underground, the book that I've written, it's all in there as far as the storyline, was from Chatham, Ontario. That's where this guy was. He was a team leader
for one. Share that, because I found that fascinating.
When and this is real life, man. Yeah. He was real life. One of these the team was called the Super Six. He was the team leader of that team. The skills, I don't have probably time to get into it, the skills that these guys demonstrated. And why was it in the 60s after World War II, all of a sudden the newspapers around Ontario going crazy because the Queen comes for her cross Canada trip? And they basically took a local police department officer and had him as the bodyguard for the Queen. And even federal police and military guys, generals, are going, what the heck? Why do you have this like beatnik cop from like a small town in Ontario as the bodyguard, and MI5 is going, mind your business, we're putting your man on the body of the Queen, because they knew where their assets were. Okay. Yeah. But to talk about how cool some of this stuff is and tying into Chatham, in my research, yeah, I ended up getting a hold of a police chief that team member worked under years after the war. This police chief was alive as of about 5-6 years ago in his 90s, but still with us and very lucid. And I talked to the chief and I said, I want to talk to you about someone that served under you in the 60s and 70s. And when I mentioned his name, the chief was, I remember him. And I explained what we believe with the background of this guy. And the chief at 90 on the phone is saying, I knew it. I knew there was something incredible, but we saw this guy do things we couldn't explain, all this kind of thing. And let me give you an example of what they couldn't explain. No. This one man had a close family member that was connected to the Chatham Police Department at the time and was threatened by a local Hells Angels gang that actually had a chapter in the Chatham area. No. And as one man, he walked into that clubhouse, tore through about 10 guys and threatened them. You shut the clubhouse. I'm giving you 7 days to pack up and leave, or I'll return and you'll all be dead. And the Hells Angels clubhouse shut its doors and left town. And I confirmed that with the police chief. He's like, yes, that happened. So, man, some incredible history. I mean, that stuff that, dude, is some of the best movie quality stuff. And Camp X, for example, was referenced in the movie Gangster Squad with Sean Penn, Josh Brolin. Camp X is referenced right at the beginning with all the agent training. So, it's not in the Canadian personality, Greg, to boast, to be, talk about it. So we got a little bit of little brother syndrome to the United States. Yeah. And so much of when the war really got into stride became about America's involvement post Pearl Harbor, December of 41, right? That there's reasons why, as Canadians, that we have never really been in the limelight, and it's just not in the Canadian personality, which is why I wrote the book, Camp X Underground, which is why I've just finished the definitive life book on Bill Underwood's life, and that'll be on Amazon in September. So great history.
Bill stuff is amazing too.
Oh yeah,
people need to check him out, and actually, that's what you've taught us, some of those moves that he learned and he taught, right? So it was amazing what he's done. I got to add to that little story too, because we were just talking about this Bible, which came from my grandfather, and he was a minister, United Church minister from Owen Sound.
Okay.
But at the time, he was in Sarnia in the late 50s. And when they opened up Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia, when the Queen came to Canada, he was right beside her. And my sister's got the picture. She lives in England. So I got to get that picture or a
Oh,
picture
that's
of that
awesome.
picture because it would
That's
be
awesome.
interesting to see if that police officer is in that photo with
Yeah.
my grandfather and the Queen
Yeah.
cutting the ribbon for the Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia. It
Yeah.
just, again, we've got so much cool history that we don't
Exactly.
talk about, and we need to start talking about it,
Absolutely.
right? We really do. And people have to realize and have a great big heart of that. And let's not be silent anymore. I keep telling people it's time to be loud.
Absolutely.
And I've got this shirt on about human trafficking, and it's getting to be a big thing in the news right now. But and it's true, it is a big thing. But we need to get loud as Canadians. We have to start just opening our mouth, talking to other people, getting together, linking arms, because we can't be stopped if we get going. Guaranteed, right?
Absolutely. And as much as the amazing stuff that we've talked about today in Camp X with a few side references, we've not talked about, I mean, there's only so much time, of course, but we've not talked about the Arrow. We've not talked about the Devil's Brigade, the founding North American Special Forces unit that was half Canadian. We've not talked about Canada-Russia 72 at the height of Cold War, the war on ice and what Canada did in that moment on a world scale, which to Canadians in that generation, where our parents and grandparents were when Henderson scored that goal was linked to like the Kennedy assassination. Everybody remembers when, Henderson took that shot, and when the shots were fired in Dallas, or in those types of things. I mean, there's still so much more, let alone that stuff. We have
Yeah,
so much to be proud of.
it's so
Yeah.
true. So we're
Yeah.
gonna shift a little bit if you have
Good.
time. This
Yeah.
is 35 minutes, so we'll cut this to the next segment.
Sure.
I'd love to talk about the Arrow.
Sure.
I've learned about the Arrow as well. I know you've got way more information than I do, and I just know we had the best plane in the world,
Mhm.
and I believe Diefenbaker sold us out, or somebody got him to sell us out. I don't know the whole linkage because you never know what is behind the scenes, but we had the best capabilities in the world in the air, and we gave it up. And they say it was because of money. I think it was deeper than that. But please
Mhm.
share about the Arrow because I know that's a deep thing that you've been getting into too.
Absolutely. This is certainly, it's always been a passion for me, as part of great Canadian history. And again, I've woven this into Camp X Underground, New Beginnings. Essentially, there is multiple reasons why when Avro Canada in the 50s started developing an advanced supersonic, fighter interceptor, that it was so special. And the reason why they were pushed, Greg, to essentially develop something that was so special was because of necessity. At that time in the Cold War in the early 1950s, we were facing the threat of brand new Russian nuclear bombers, the Tupolovs and so forth, and different breeds of Russian bombers, and they were jet powered. So now there was a threat of not just like, let's say, missiles being thrown. We could have essentially Russian jet bombers, nuclear bombers, come right over the Arctic and drop payloads right into Canada and the States. And so the Canadian Air Force was like, guys, we have so much territory, second largest, country in the world by land mass. And we don't have aircraft to be able to defend that. We've got to put fighter interceptors, and missiles weren't at the precision level that they are today. And so this came up with the tendered requirement for, we need something that can cover incredible amounts of Arctic territory. And we're talking high speeds. We're talking plus Mach 2 when the best American plane was barely hitting Mach 1. We're talking they needed Mach 2.5. Okay, when the best the America had to offer was barely supersonic, was barely Mach 1. Okay, and so all of these things came together. The ingenuity of Avro Canada, absolutely phenomenal. They did it. They created an aircraft that was said they couldn't be done. They changed the shape of it. They created one of the first delta wing fighters. Now, to be fair, the Brits created just a little earlier than that, around the same time, the delta wing bomber called the Vulcan, but it was a completely different capability. But it was one of the first delta wings. And when they created this thing, Greg, it surpassed everything from ceiling operational, ceiling, to speed, to its technical abilities. There are aircraft today that don't match what the Arrow was doing in the 50s. Some would argue because we don't really need the requirement of that particular spec, and that's fine, but they're still beating it. And that was the 50s. You know what I mean? So it comes down to the fact of, and this is where I have to admit, I'm a little bit torn, trying to be honest with history. I do agree that I think the Avro program was shut down. And it was a loss to Canada. It was shut down in some very sketchy, very questionable, on questionable terms. Diefenbaker shut the program down. And I think that honestly, that there was a number of factors coming into play when you really understand what was going on. Number one, was there pressure from the US and other governments for our Canadian government to stop doing this because it embarrassed the crap out of them? Oh yeah, of course there was. There was definitely a conspiratorial angle of pressure, especially for the Americans, saying, look, you don't need to develop this. We'll give you our missiles instead, all these kinds of things. So there definitely was that kind of subversive type activity. But there's a couple other things that played out very practically. At the time, the Diefenbaker government, essentially the conservative government, came into power on the promises of cost cutting and budget slashing. So for them all of a sudden to convince the nation, who didn't really understand the Arrow, to spend millions upon millions upon millions continually on this project, it's a tough sell. And I think that's just being fair about it, right? So there was that economic pressure. But of a truth, Crawford Gordon Jr., who was the top industrialist in Canada at the time, Crawford, he needed to learn a thing or two about people skills. He could be a real bugger. And so he immediately got on the serious nerves of Diefenbaker. Crawford Gordon Jr. did not help the situation. He threatened the prime minister by way of saying, you will not shut this program down, it's demanding things of the prime minister. So don't get me wrong, he was absolutely brilliant. But I think if we're being asked the question, and honestly, yes, there was some conspiracy. There was some dodgy stuff that went in there, but there were some other factors. Frankly, I think the prime minister was happy to see the program dealt with because it would basically, shut Crawford Gordon Jr. down. Okay, because they had such a.
You could stop there and talk about Crawford a little bit so people know who.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Crawford, again, another phenomenal story. He was a chief industrialist at the time, top industrialist of Canada at the time. He actually was he ran the munitions in World War II, for C.D. Howe, who was the minister over that. So Crawford had a real get it done attitude and could do it, proved himself during the war. When C.D. Howe was in a position with the previous Liberal government to kind of have some control, and Avro Canada was needed, but they were kind of waffling in their performance and issues with a president that was CEO was kind of questionable. He brought Crawford in and said, no, you guys are going to put him in. Crawford came out on board, brilliant at what he does, and very, very gifted at what he does. And again, ran into the problems of the Arrow. It shut down in 1959. But Greg, you just can't make this stuff up. The thing about Crawford's story, which is crazy, is the fact that part of his story that's in memorial now is about his love affair with his secretary at the time. So at the same time the company's going down, he was madly in love with his secretary, and he was married at the time, and she wouldn't be with him because she was married, and she was a moral girl, and so there was this kind of a bit of a love triangle that was a little bit going on here in a way, and Crawford Gordon Jr., when she left, his secretary left Avro Canada right near the end of the program. She had to flee because she loved Crawford so much, but he wouldn't divorce his wife and said, I can't be here. I'm not going to be a homewrecker. Okay. And she went to New York City. Well, Crawford was an alcoholic. He left Avro, the Avro Canada offices in Malton, Ontario, and he pursued her to New York. And he stayed in New York for the longest time while the program was collapsing and pursuing her, trying to get her back. And he died in a hotel, basically drank himself to death. Right. And what's even crazier is the most powerful and well-known industrialist in Canada at the time, they had a mini funeral for him. His body was lost and disappeared. Like, to this day, we don't know where the body of Crawford Gordon Jr. is, because it was such a traumatic thing that the small family came together, and one part of the family thought, well, certainly you're taking care of the body. The other side thought, well, you're taking care of it. They went back to Canada from New York. Nobody kind of eventually they didn't know who the body was, and they think they just threw it in the furnace with street people, and in the end, the woman, Crawford Gordon Jr.'s secretary that he fell in love with, was Bill Underwood's oldest daughter.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Like you said,
And
you can't make this stuff
and
up.
you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
So, but Crawford was brilliant. And again, to wrap up the travesty of the Arrow, it truly is a very sorrowful story. There are still seniors that, if you talk too much about it, they get weepy because they realized, and they lived it, how much Canada lost. The ensuing brain drain. The top executives, engineers, designers, the techs that worked on the Arrow program, they left Canada, the largest portion of them. They went down to the States, Greg, and they started up a few little companies you might have heard of. NASA, Lockheed, Boeing. I mean, they became the brains. So when you look at it, and the last comment on this is that when the Avro program shut down, it still wasn't performing at the level they knew they could, because what they were trying to do is create an all-Canadian aircraft. Okay. Avro Canada created the airframe. Avro also and Orenda Engines created the Iroquois engine, which was a superior Canadian engine that blew away Rolls-Royce in their production value. They had the Canadian Sparrow missile package. They were about to put together an all-Canadian Arrow that would have shattered those other areas of performance as well. You put that sucker together, you have an absolutely incredible aircraft that was decades ahead of its time. The whole future of aviation and specialist aviation industry, I would argue, was a destiny of Canada, and we lost it.
That's what I read. Really, that's the things that I've seen in the past. You're right. We were a superpower. I mean, and really, we are. Unbeknownst to us, though, unfortunately.
We have skills and innovation in our history. Absolutely.
Unbelievable. And we don't pay our people. We don't, appreciate our people. So they go elsewhere. And really, that's what happened with that whole group there. I mean, they ended up being heads of those companies, and we know what happened with the States. Look at their air superiority, right? Look what they've got. And it really, as far as I'm concerned, all came from Canada, from the Aero program.
Yeah.
So
it was the birthplace of a lot of technology, and almost every major modern craft has technology from it that was originally designed from the Aero. I mean, one way or another. And so
look at that. So we've got the ground, CampX. We have the super spies that really started the CIA, which was a good organization at the very beginnings, right? And then you've got Avro Aero that was in Canada, all the beginnings there. And now you look around the world, and we've been shattered apart, and it's almost like, okay, so let's back it up a little bit about our beloved leader, and what he's doing with Canada. It's almost like he knows our history, he knows the power that we have, he knows the history that we have, and let's just make it into a communist country and shackle everybody into 15-minute cities if we can go there. But quite honestly, like you said, as a nation, we have the abilities more than any other nation, as far as I'm concerned, to be the strongest. We really do. It's just
I would argue that there is a God anointing on a divine anointing on Canada for innovation, creativity, and it's here now, actually. But it's evidence today. And one of the evidences in a modern environment today that hardly anybody knows anything about is Canada's Joint Task Force 2, or Canada's JTF 2.
Yes.
And again, there's reasons why, to some degree, it's not known, because they have truly been able to be a little better than some organizations at being the quiet professionals, and they don't leak information out. But as you know, I've had years of history of being involved professionally with JTF2 and working with them. And I will tell you, let me tell you what I learned. And I remember having this articulated to me on base in Hereford with the British SAS. And I've had a long relationship with the SAS and SBS in the UK. It was shared with me. Look, to get it all simple, we were talking about comparing Five Eyes and Seven Eyes Tier 1 assets and their capabilities and so forth. And it was basically explained to me there. Listen, here's how it works. If you want to get anything done really fast in the world, with a top level of operator, you call SEAL Team 6 or Dev Group. And the reason why is they have a tier 1 caliber of operator, but they have the big bad American delivery machine. They've got the aircraft, they've got the boats, the money to do, they can drop operators within hours anywhere in the world. And that's why you would call them. When you want something done fast, you call them. If you want it done right operationally and with upper end command experience, you call Delta or CAG. They just are a cut above. They're just a cut, in my opinion, and many others that are kind of quiet with their opinion, but CAG or Delta is just a slight cut above the SEALs, and I've worked with both. Okay. And again, and they also have the big bad American delivery system with all of the planes and trains and everything, ships, everything, every kind of tech, all the tech they've got. However, it is understood in a modern environment that pound per pound, the best trained and most skilled individual tier 1 special forces operator, hands down, is Canada's JTF2. The individual skill sets and abilities. And I could give you story after story after story. Okay. And, yeah, I'll share this. All right. If you've ever been involved or witnessed CQB, okay, so in other words, guys with guns, and I'm thinking I can share this, okay, because there's 1,000 TV shows where you even see like Green Berets, and tell the show, okay, this is how we do it. One guy's going to go diagonal, other guy's going to button hook into through the threshold of a door, point the weapon here, clear the room from the corner to center, whatever, and those skills and tactics. All right. When you see professionals on television doing that, they're moving at a controlled hurry. So you see them walking, they're doing this. Let me put it this way. It is fact that our Canadian boys are doing CQB running, not at a quick walk. Yeah. They are running and hitting targets. They are literally sprinting into the room. There's a speed that our guys are operating in CQB that's never been seen before. Wow. And one of my SAS buddies that I've known for many, many years said to me, first time I met him when he was over here looking at what we were doing. He was here on a symposium, and he was saying, mate, he turned to me, he says, I don't know what it is about you Canadians. You are so bloody innovative. He said, I came here to learn a simple, if I could grab my commanding officer said, if you can grab a few things to learn from, we could bring back from the Canadians, maybe a few things, and that'd be great. We'll send you over. He said, I came back with this. I don't even know where to start. Yeah. Our boys are absolutely excellent. At what they do, and it's recognized within the community of those operators. So the tradition continues. And if I can brag, can I brag on one more unit? Because they're not as well known at all. Okay. NTOG, our Naval Tactical Operations Group. They are a group, they're our Canadian Navy group. All right. I'm going to share a story. I hope I don't get in trouble, but I'll share a story. It's true. I won't give names. But our NTOG group essentially they're like, right now, they've come along in the last number of years, but they're essentially a dedicated SEALs unit. They would be like the Navy SEALs, the Blue Water SEAls, not DevGru. They're not Tier 1 or SEAL Team 6, but they're like the other Blue Water SEAls units. And our guys are excellent. And I had the privilege of being involved with them over a number of years in the beginning of when the unit stood up, not that long ago. It was within the last 10 years that unit stood up. Well, our boys are doing so well as a young unit that I knew one of the commanders and chiefs of a fairly recent operation, the last, let's say 2 to 3 years ago, was at an operation. Our Canadian boys joined a multinational task force to basically hit pirate freighters. You think of Captain Phillips, that movie, to hit right. Pirate freighters that were going after bigger freighters and things like that, or those types of operations. They were in with American, Spanish, all kinds of different groups. Our smaller Canadian unit was a part of a JFO, Joint Forces operation. A storm came up, hurricane kind of storm came up. Yep. Every nation backed out of the operation except our boys. Every team backed out. Our Canadian, and I know the guy's a friend of mine. Okay. He was in command and basically reported, no, we'll go out. And they're like, you're going to go out. Like, we'll do it. We got it. We'll take it. One unit went out there and did that. They went out there on the high seas in the middle of freaking insanity. They hit it like a rock star. Okay. Yeah. Just nailed the targets, got it done. And when it was said and done, my friend was invited into the Joint Commander's office. It was American. And when he came to the door and he called for him, brought him in and said, listen, I need the room, please. And some other American staff and we're in there, and they left the room and closed the door. He said, I want to share something with you that I need to ask that is not repeated outside this room. Yes, sir. He said, I want you to know that I would take any one of your Canadian boys for 10 of ours. He said,
Wow.
you guys are exceptional. And this is a young baby unit.
That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Like I said, we have
Canada,
so much cool history, and
yeah.
that's not very old history. And
Oh, this is very recent.
right, and
In
we
the
just keep getting
last
better and
decade.
better,
Yep. Yeah,
better and
exactly.
better. So, and we
Yeah.
can do that. So that's awesome. That's good
Yeah.
to hear. I'm glad you shared that. And yes, I hope you don't get in trouble with that one, but
No, it's
you
all
didn't
good.
share it.
I've been vague enough, and there's a lot bigger problems in the world right now. So
Oh, you got that right. You got that right. But
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so if there's one closing remark you could tell people, Canadians really, but the world, like what they really need to do, and men I'm looking at mostly, but as Canadians, what we need to do, and how this can help them. And honestly, people, go get Robbie's book. The name of your book again is
Camp X Underground New Beginnings. If you just literally went to Amazon and plugged in Camp X, you're going to find Camp X Underground with my name on it. So yeah, thank
so
you.
please, people, do that. I mean, it'll be amazing. Robbie's done a lot of research on this, as you know, and doing the operations that he's done with so many groups around the world. But so Robbie, you got the last talk. If you can just
Well,
share.
I would say for me, I will keep it simple, but I'd like to address that for me when it comes to final thoughts on things and where we are and what we need to do. I am a Christian, and I certainly I believe in some spiritual things and positions that we need to take on things, but in the super practical in this dimension, as far as that's concerned, I absolutely want to relay that internationally, men, it's time to stand up and be men. It's time for you to stand up, be protectors of your significant others, your wives, whoever is else in your life. Be protectors of your kids, okay? And to stand up and, like our grandfathers, take some ownership for the country that gave you the life that you have, okay? And part of the reason I'm addressing this is because it's the very clear attempt and psychological and real operation to feminize men. And if that offends somebody there, I don't care, okay? Because it's the truth and I stand on it. The reality is that men have been made to be who they are as warriors, as protectors. Our grandfathers, if they were here today and they were of sound body and they were younger, they would have stormed Parliament with rifles by now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Our grandfathers or fathers and grandfathers, if they were, in those types of positions today, it just wouldn't have happened, to be honest with you. But the fact is that, guys, it's our watch now. Men, it's our watch. So what are you going to do with it? And part of my heart is to motivate, to deliver protection skills. I do that. And to try to motivate men. I mean, I certainly have things on my heart as far as spiritual things and serving God and get to know what God has done for us. But I just encourage you to stand up, be men, be proud nationalists, be proud patriots, because we're a blessed country, and you have everything in the world to be proud of as being Canadian men, and certainly men of from all kinds of different backgrounds. Play your role.
That's amazingly said. Thank you, Robbie, and I appreciate your time today for sure.
Yeah. Awesome, Greg. Good to see you, and the ARC Radio crew again. It's great to visit with you.